Well, it's a pleasure today to talk with somebody I've known for years and years and years. Have worn many masks over the years, Robert, but this is Robert Collins. Now, you're the Director of Workforce Development for the LEDC, the London Economic Development Corporation, correct?
That's correct, Glenn.
Yeah. And I want to talk all about that, but I think people need to know just what kind of varied background that you've had. It's been a long time, as I said, with many hats. Can you just briefly go over that with us?
Sure, Glenn. I actually came here as an international student many years ago and sort of went to Weston for a while, then Teachers College. And I really locked in. I got a job as an assistant community school leader at Trafalgar Public School on Hamilton Road. And as part of that, we were part of the Crouch Neighborhood Resource Center and were steered a lot by the Hamilton Road Area Council. So I spent a wonderful time period really learning about community activation, some of the really frontline challenges facing all of the different service providers, whether it be police, public health, Children's Aid Society, educators, as we were trying to help really support a neighborhood with multiple challenges, because there were actually sort of 4 schools in that neighborhood, which I'm afraid still today face some educational deficits and some challenges. And so that really sort of helped orient me to then actually I worked for the Public Utilities Commission and Recreation. I moved to actually the province of Ontario and moved up to be sort of a manager there. And then I ended up with the City of London in various different roles, including having some responsibility for social policy and then recreation services, Goodwill Industries. And now I have the great opportunity to be part of the London Economic Development Corporation, which is sort of charged with helping bring new business to London and to help existing businesses grow in sort of key sectors where they're going to make a difference to bringing in net new money to our community. And my particular portfolio is sort of on the people side, connecting talent to companies and companies to talent.
Yeah. So here I thought I had a very diverse background, but you're the king. You have more hats in your closet than I do.
Well, you've been fighting fires for a long time, Glenn.
Yeah. But it's great talking to you because I've known you in many of those dimensions. And of course, this series, Food Bites, is about poverty. And I know you've been in the middle of a lot of that over the last few decades. But I did want to ask you, at the food bank, for instance, our numbers are now at record levels. They've never been this high in 35 years. But whenever I'm down there, I keep running into people that just last year were working, or the year before, right? Years ago when the food bank was going, it was just mostly people on social services. But now it's really people have really having a difficult time in the workplace, either keeping work or, being able to manage it with family or with sick parents or whatever it is. How has COVID been for you at the LEDC, but also as you look at workforce development, things like that? What kind of effect has that had on us as a community?
Well, interestingly enough, for actually us helping to sort of bring new companies to London, et cetera, actually we've been remarkably successful because we've been able to adapt using Zoom, as we're using now, using drone footage, and really celebrating London's assets. But we've been very aware, chatting to our companies about the on-again, off-again transitions. Obviously, sort of agri-food, London's a leading community in Canada for agri-food, and people work in very close proximity together in those environments. So, then there have been some sort of mini outbreaks that companies have had to address. There are also a lot of the workers, they've got family responsibilities. So when education has meant working from home, they've had to leave the workforce for periods of time. It's been very, very stressful for people, both in good jobs and in those which are more marginal. And for instance, we saw a significant loss of part-time jobs for a while.
Yeah.
But overall, and this is what's really quite, astounding, really, is that there were 40,000 more people in work at the end of last year than there were in 2017. That's annual stats.
Wow.
And also, there's about 45,000 more people who are saying that they're interested in working and or working. which means our participation rate has gone up from a 60%, which was one of the lowest CMA in Canada, to one of the middle of the pack. So something has actually sort of happened to at least have people wanting to be looking for employment and engaged. And as you're aware, there's been a recent study that's looked at those who are even further on the sidelines and what are some of the challenges they face. And we do have some big challenges as a community that we have to address.
Mm-hmm. So what about talent? Like there's jobs, there's the opportunity, but London has to compete with all these other municipalities to try to get talent to come here.
Yeah.
And I know that's a challenge. We have many amenities, but there's also other things I'm sure we have to work at. How do you see us at a talent level, not just a job opportunity level, but the ability to have people to fill those roles?
Well, and I will just say this, when I looked just before coming on with you today, we have over 6,500 open jobs right now in our community as of today. And many of those are skilled and degrees of skill. And so it is a very competitive labor market. We're very fortunate that both of our educational institutions, both Western and Fanshawe, are looking at new pathways, whether it be micro-credentials and other ways to help reskill people in shorter time periods for some of those opportunities with a slightly higher skill than people may have had. And bear in mind, if you think about the last 2 years, if you haven't had access to a computer,
Mm-hmm.
and or your children have been using it for you,
Yeah.
how have you kept in touch with your skill sets and opportunities? So I think of almost the last couple of years as really being a setback for many people in being able to move forward.
Yeah.
So when I look at the absolute supply, when you look at the great programs from Fanshawe and Western producing people, but when I say Western, I mean Western and its affiliates.
Yeah.
We do have access to talent, and you may have just seen our overall population growth numbers, which came out, which the London CMA had the largest population growth of any CMA in Ontario.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
But that has been primarily, I haven't seen the details yet because they haven't come out, but they're saying that's predominantly from migrant and immigrant talent.
Hmm.
So London is seen, that record is telling us that London is seen as a desirable community for talent to come to.
Hmm.
Now, do we have the talent to, and do we have all the means in place to both reskill and support those people who want to work? I'm not sure they're all in place right now, and I get worried because of financial pressures that some of the government aids to actually getting those training programs up and running might get reduced because of those fiscal.
Yeah.
And that's going to be key, both for existing companies and the existing people working to reskill, to continue to reskill, and as well for people who are on the margins to have those opportunities.
Yeah. Can you tell me how, I know many of the folks we see at the food bank, they've come from some pretty hard hit companies in London, many of them larger. Can you tell us what the state of those particular businesses are and how they're doing?
Well, in our areas, like our manufacturing, and this is a sort of, our emphasis on, as I say at LEDC, is bringing net new money into the community. So that tends to be in the agri-food industry, manufacturing, our tech community, etc. So, but the areas that have been harder hit have tended to be retail, tended to be food service, hospitality. So, and that's been especially challenging for people in those areas because they're often really attracted to them because of the people contact. So then you move from having high people contact to isolation.
Yeah.
So that's then exacerbated mental health issues, feeling of connectedness, feeling of actually, what is my worth? So that trigger to mental health supports and then people's perception of their distance to the labor force. Now, the good news is, you know, as of today, things are opening up much more in those traditional sectors.
Yeah.
So that there's some optimism there, but it depends on how far. It depends on how deeply you've been affected, and then your ability to rise to that. And that's some of us are blessed. We've got tremendous support systems that have helped us through those. Others are not.
Yeah.
So I really and the recent study, which was done by PricewaterhouseCoopers for London, identified that there's about between 30 and 40,000 people, in addition to the unemployed number that's reported monthly, which is around 18,000 in the London CMA, who say they're looking for work. There's about 30 to 40,000 sitting on the sidelines. So it could be a health issue, mental health, or the perception that there isn't work that can actually pay enough,
Yeah.
or they don't have access to the childcare or transit to get them to the opportunities that exist.
Yeah.
So we've got to, as a community, we really do have to come together to look at some of those issues and say, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. So can we just talk about the future
Yeah.
a bit here? If you remember, when I was finished in politics in 2011, one of the first things I did was to a Bridges Out of Poverty conference, and you were there.
Yes, yes.
We had talked about it, and I remember speaking to the group saying, look at all of these things that you're planning are wonderful. But as a food bank director, I've been at it a long time. And now altogether, we've been through 4 recessions, right? We've been through a pandemic. And always during the time when things are really tough, governments do show up and they help out. We've seen that again during this pandemic. I saw it in the Great Recession when I was in Ottawa. But what I was trying to say to the folks that day is that if you're planning on that, the difficulty is in a democracy is that governments change. And then governments have different mandates or feel they have different mandates. So in the case of the pandemic, we have a massive debt at nationally, provincially as well, that we have to, deal with. And usually what happens is that programs are enhanced during times when things are tough. And then as we come out of that, governments seek to pay down that debt. And one of the first things that they do is they will cut it on social programs, the low-hanging fruit kind of things. And sometimes that will be on job things as well, retraining and other things. What's your view of what will happen this time, Robert? I mean, it's a massive debt, but it's also, we supposedly have learned a lot of lessons through this pandemic. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. The government does realize it's going to be a longer runway. In other words, it hasn't been just a financial hit. It's been a societal hit.
Yeah.
So I think I'm hopeful that they will see that there does need to be a menu of supports that will help with that transition, and with potentially a more affordable childcare being available, which will take 3 to 5 years to ramp up, right? To be realistic, to have people trained, to pay them reasonably. I get really quite worried about the range of social and other programs which are not adequately funded. So therefore, people who are providing these supports don't have pensions. They don't necessarily have themselves the meat. So are we creating good employment for people who are doing good work? I think it's a significant challenge for our society, especially when government shed responsibilities themselves, when they moved employment services from government through to the not-for-profit sector and then froze funding.
Yeah.
I think we've created some challenges for ourselves by that distribution. Now I'm wearing my social hat.
I know. We've seen it during actually the pandemic that, a fair bit of resources were released by the feds, by the province. The city tried to manage that the best they could. And you saw a number of agencies that were trying to buff up. They were hiring people, they were trying to move forward. So, I worry about the future of those staffing arrangements as the
Yes.
funding begins to drop down. What will they do? But
Yeah.
also the kind of work that people have in there.
Yes.
Often they're not the most, uh, satisfying as far what you're doing and you're helping people, but really you don't have a pension in what you're doing. You might be
Yes.
making just a little bit more than a minimum wage. So, I mean, I think what you're raising is a really important point.
Mhm.
During the pandemic, we have said as a country we want to take care of these people, and so therefore here's what we do. But if the workers themselves, the people that are providing the care,
Mhm.
don't actually have the kind of resources that are required, that doesn't do us well for the future. Correct?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Something which I don't think is really recognized is everybody wants the employers to be more responsible,
Hmm.
and I think they want to be. But when you think about sort of London Middlesex, we have about 14,500 employers. We have about 375, give or take one or two, that have 100 or more. We have about 1,800 that have between 20 and 99, and the rest are all 1 to 19.
That's like 12, what, 12,000 or so?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
approximately 12. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we think about that, and employers are very busy running their enterprises, especially those, so they not until after you're 20 do you normally maybe have a human resources person who's doing everything, from workers' comp to recruitment to payroll to whatever. So the ability to actually connect to people and tell stories and to bring people in well to those enterprises, I think is a real challenge. I know that I know how effective businesses have been to support business cares
Yeah.
and others, but obviously I would love to see them be able to, we used to have a campaign called Hire One, which was, could you please think about how you could hire one more person into your enterprise and create a employment, and meaningful employment, not a job for somebody who's actually contributing to the enterprise.
Yeah.
I think we've got to look at how we can bridge and help prepare people better for employment and connect them to employers in a way that employers, um, their efforts are, how should I put it? It's easier for employers to reach into those talent pools than it currently is.
Yeah.
And I think we've got some shifts that we have to make there.
Yeah.
And government is there's a massive change underway in Ontario of reorganization of employment services.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that through the learning process of this, that that the effectiveness of the preparation of the services and the link to employers who have not really been consulted in that process
Yeah.
to date are better linked to those services.
It's interesting because with COVID, as with homeless
Yeah.
folks, there was a real kind of opening up of the collective mind in our communities about homeless folks and the
Mhm.
challenges they were going through. And a lot of the judgments that had been there previously kind of dissipated during this time of the pandemic. They just want to see those folks helped. But I know that prior to COVID coming, there had been this kind of duality, narrative going on in many of the communities across the country about, you have the social side and you have the business side. And
Mhm.
often there was this sense that the business side was not doing enough. And,
Mhm.
that was not our experience to a certain degree as a food bank. But I do understand that, people are saying, look, we need better wages, we need
Yeah.
benefits, all that kind of stuff. But one thing COVID did teach us is that many of our businesses were living close to the bone.
Mhm.
They weren't
Exactly.
surviving easily, right? And even now, especially in the retail sector, the service sectors you're talking about, they're trying to come back again now as things open
Mhm.
up, but they don't tend to have the capital behind them or the savings behind them that other larger groups do. So one thing I hope is that as we come out of this, that we see the business community is really much more a part of the solution
Mhm.
for moving forward, not just for poverty or people that are homeless, but for the health of our community, right? And the ability to be able to find prosperity and work our way out of it. Do you have a feeling that that will happen, Robert?
I'm optimistic. I've often, when I've had an opportunity, urged that perhaps some of the EI rules be modified so that, in fact, employers are rewarded for keeping people on rather than actually them paying into a fund that then helps
Mhm.
those kinds. And if they add employees, there's a there's a bonusing factor or a reduction factor. So I think sometimes I'm not sure we have the right incentives
Mm.
in place.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of. So I'm yet again
Cautiously optimistic.
just because of the opportunities that are coming down the pipe. When I see the companies that are coming to London and expanding, with like even Amazon as an example, for their regular workforce, we're paying sort of $18.50 or $19 an hour to start. They're paying benefits from day one, an educational allowance after the first year, an Amazon share after year two. How should I put it? There are companies coming, and then that's just not to. I think of Amazon as sort of the McDonald factor. When that came in, McDonald's were training young people so well in the particular roles they had that became sort of almost an industry standard.
That's right. Yeah. I had three kids that learned that at McDonald's. It was great training for them.
Well, and we think that those kind of things are yet again. Uh, right now, I think the last time a living wage was done for London was it 1633 or something like that,
Mhm.
which I'm sure needs to be readjusted. It hasn't been done for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, so costs have been going up, but I've been pleased to see that some of the wage structure has been going up. By the way, I should point out other community efforts that the London and Area Works series on CTV, which is every sort of 3 series on Monday nights. What we've been trying to do from both from LEDC, but also the other community agencies, the Workforce Planning Board and others, we've been trying to show inside companies and what they look like. Because most of us, if we're going past a factory or an office building or whatever, we don't really know what the company does or what kind of work there is within those. We're trying to increase awareness of what are the opportunities and what's involved, because there's all sorts of people who don't really ever know what company X really does and what somebody does in a given day inside an enterprise.
Yeah. I think there's also some good news coming, and you would know this far better than I would. But I've spent some time with Graham Henderson, the new head
Yes.
of the Chamber of Commerce here in London, and he's just done an internal review of their 900 members,
Mhm.
and what they discovered from that was the whole idea of gender parity, the whole idea of equity, of inclusion. These are now uppermost in the minds of companies. They're not just looking, they're trying to survive. They're getting the message, as we all are, as we
Mhm.
move forward, that these things are going to have to be pivotal or fundamental to business opportunities in the future. Are you seeing that? I presume you are.
Yeah, very much so. Companies realize that their talent has choices,
Yeah.
and if they're not in a welcoming environment where their skills are being used and appreciated, then they will go somewhere else.
Mm.
So it's with that, but so that's the good side of having jobs open. It forces that change process perhaps earlier than perhaps some are comfortable doing that. Also, London has a richer range of services which are helping both the job seekers prepare, but are also helping employers understand how can they reach more into different demographic populations.
Yeah.
Can they reconfigure work hours so that people can arrive at 9 o'clock after their children have gone to school?
Yeah.
You know, they're needing to really consider the needs of their workforce
Mhm.
much more than perhaps that they have in the past.
Yeah. So can we end with one big question for you? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Robert, but you're so much wiser than I am in these things. But if you could see the city whether
Yep.
it's City Hall or us all as a community, making one big change that you think that would help with workforce development. Because
Mhm.
as those things are successful, those people won't need to come to the food bank and we can see our numbers shrink. Can I ask you what that would be? What would you
Mhm.
like to see?
Um, I must say that at this point in time, given where the range of opportunities are being created, the first one would be a very active approach to transit.
Yeah.
So that would be just because of Maple Leaf Foods and others. We're recognizing we're also a regional workforce, that the transit is not just within London, it's within our surrounding communities and people mobility. People want to live in other communities and come to work in London and vice versa. So the more we pay attention to that as an underlying condition, I think it will facilitate everything. Right now, I believe a lot of the transit from outside London is used for medical purposes, right? Important to get people to healthcare.
Yeah.
But I do think we need to be able to um, get people to work. The second, obviously, is that we do start to benchmark wages so that that more people are earning a livable wage.
Mhm.
And so that would be, I mean, that's a universal rather than a, yeah.
Yeah. Robert, thank you for this. We might circle back and do another one of these because I think you've got so much knowledge here of things that we don't really know.
Yeah.
But, you know, the LEDC has done such a good job at bringing all these facts and data and
Yeah.
opportunities there, but we often don't hear about them as much as we need to. So would you mind, maybe we can do a round two or something in the near future, come back to this and talk about some more of these things that you see.
Yeah.
And I would be interested in plumbing into some of your knowledge about the social side of things and what we're going through here as a community and see the lessons that you've picked up over the years and how you would like to see us do better. And maybe one of the key things is how could you see for us as a food bank to
Yeah.
reduce our numbers, because we were moving in that direction. Our numbers are going down and down and down every
Yeah.
month. But now, because of the pandemic, they've shot up, and I don't know how much longer they'll last.
Yeah.
But I could use your advice on that. Can we circle back and do that?
Glenn, it's always a great privilege and a pleasure to chat with you, and really appreciate the very important contribution that the food bank makes. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. And we'll get back to you. Appreciate this very much.
Good. Thank you.